Thank you to my patrons, Alfie and Juan, for making this video possible. What's going on YouTube? CALSOSCOPED. Today's video will be level 1 of blending your subjects with backgrounds and making your backgrounds really fit the composition. So I'm going to take you guys on a ride through how I would really get this done, and the reason this is level 1 is because I'm not going to try to make it too complicated. I want you guys to get all of the info down. This is the subject, this is the background that I'm going to be using, and this is the sky that I will be using. Now, since this is all about skies, I'm going to show you guys the first thing I would do if I want to implement a sky into an already made photo. So a lot of times you can use the select sky, so that select sky tab, it is very helpful. And you guys see it does select the sky, but sometimes it's really kind of off. So what I like to go with in most cases is I like to use the quick selection. Now select sky can be perfect for like those perfect photos, but if you have atmospheric perspective, which is when you go into the background, you guys see more white. See how this is, if I were to take my color picker, this is more saturated on my color picker. And then if I go back in their perspective, it almost gets to white, right? So that's what atmospheric perspective is. So that's why I can mess up selections of sky. So what I'm gonna do is take my quick selection tool, W is the shortcut, and we're just gonna click on here and we're going to get a nice selection of this ground. This is what is kind of in focus that it can see. And then I usually implement my polygonal lasso tool just to make sure that my edges stay pretty crisp, because when you implement a sky there and the edges aren't crisp, like if you know what I mean, or even like if I can just explain it in words, like it just gives it a very soft feathery background look that takes a lot more to get done in post when you're trying to blend the background. So just make sure that you have a sharp background cut, and we can always add some atmospheric perspective ourselves. This is my background, and I'm just gonna hit the layer mask icon. All right, so now we have just white background or whatever background color you make it, and you see our background is really sharp. You could always go in and fine tune it on a layer mask, painting on black if you want. Now I'm going to unhide this, and I'm going to bring the size of this background up. And what I'm going to be doing here is I don't want to really show any of these trees or anything like that, because it's going to throw it off, and you can kind of just lie about where the perspective actually is in a sense. So I'm going to flip it, and I want the light to be from this way so that we can get that nice light directly hitting on him. All right, take this from a smart object. Smart object makes it indestructible for when you're resizing and you don't want to get pixelation, but I'm pretty sure that I like where it is, so I'm going to rasterize this so that I can use my lasso tool, and I'm going to select this area that has this like grass here, and I'm going to see what we can do and try to make this more foggy, more atmospheric, and see what Shift F5 constant aware will do. So I did a pretty good job, and then I'm just going to use my clone stamp tool. I'm holding down Alt or Option on the Mac to select areas that I want to blend out or want to pick that are going to be like the focal points of blending out. Also, this is the layer in front, and this is just to add a little bit of blur in the front, just to give the viewer a little something, the depth of field, you know. I have more of a dark theme, so I'm going to try out curves really quick. So I'm going to add a curves layer, and I'm going to clip it to the sky. And I'm just going to bring out some of the highlights and bring the shadows down. Left side of curves, when you make points on the left side, this is more towards the shadows. Right side, it's bringing out your highlights or altering your highlights. So that's what you want to know for curves, how to make it look more dynamic, how to make something look more dynamic. See that right there? I always like those slightly dark themes. I like that more type of edgy look. But it's really going to be all up to you. But curves is your friend when you're doing backgrounds, definitely. Now I'm going to add a gradient map. I'm going to put that to a black and white gradient, and I'm going to put this on classic so I can see everything like so. Okay, and now, like I was saying before, I want this background to be pretty dark and just kind of have that focused light right here on my subject. So I'm looking, and already back here, it's pretty dark, like it's pretty dark. So I'm gonna make things towards the foreground, because as you get closer to the foreground, things get darker essentially. Right here there is a light source, so it's not the rule per se, but essentially things get darker when you're going towards the foreground. And you guys see, that already looks better with the background. See that one curves adjustment? Already makes it look a lot more unison with what's going on with that light source, okay? And for this, I'm gonna add curves as well. And you guys are just gonna see me add curves a lot. This scene kind of already looks like it's complementing and blending with others. Now, another thing that you can add to balance things is color balance, and I'll add that and see if I can adjust this anymore. And yeah, right there, looks pretty good. Add a little bit of orange to match the orange of this scene, and then I'll drag, and I'll actually use the same color balance here. Balancing lighting is the key here, and you guys see how the light actually on this image right here comes from a little bit farther over, and really the sun's hitting from here, so it doesn't really make too much sense. So this is harder to explain like live, so I'm just going to go through and then I'm going to go back and tell you what exactly I did to make this light match the subject and match the way that the sun is showcasing the light. So we're back, and I took off Andre Jackson. I took off the mask subject just so that it's going to be more clear and you guys will understand it more. So we had already added curves, like I had said, then color balance. And then what I went and did is I added a brightness and contrast layer. Okay, so you guys can see it without the layer mask. Let's see, I'll just do another representation so you guys will get it. Okay, so I know that my subject is right here. Now I have my brightness and contrast, and I brought it all the way down to 100, and my layer mask is white. So now I can paint on with black, and you can even right click for your brush settings and bring your brush down to fit more of the perspective. But see how I just kind of give it a trail to hit Andre? And that's where the light is leading. It's leading right to Andre, okay? And what you're gonna wanna do when you do this, you don't wanna just like make one straight ray. Like you guys see how I just made like a path right to him? You don't really want to do that because that doesn't really look natural. So when you're doing this, you want to kind of vary up your strokes and you want to drop your flow down. And so what you're going to do is you're going to make a path, but it's going to be more dynamic. So just kind of have fun with it and be a little bit more free with it. And you're just going to make the path a little bit more dynamic, and you're going to vary up your line so that it looks more jagged, okay? And then it leads right to him. Okay, so just make it a little bit more jagged, and then one key is everything that's on the other side of the light. So see how this light is hitting him with a ray here? Everything that's on the other side of this light, just put it back in shadow. Put it back in shadow. If something is on a ray and you know that there's a shadow on the other side of that, like the rocks are easy because you know that light's not gonna hit the other side. Put it back in shadow. And this is gonna give you super control over the lighting, and it's just gonna sell as really realistic. It's gonna sell it really easily, really fast. Then one other thing is I added one more exposure layer, and I put that right on the top, okay? So I literally delete the mask again, make a mask, invert it, and I paint white just to make this more pronounced, okay? And then one other trick you guys can use when you're doing this is you can click here, right click, blending options, and let's use underline layer. So see this blending options, you select this and you can make it blend. This is gonna blend more with the shadow. So everything that's in shadow, it's gonna take a little bit of that light off of it. And now to separate these two triangles is you just hold down Alt or Option, and this makes a better feather. So it makes like a smooth gradient of light tracing. See how nice that is? And that just is gonna help you out more in selling it. So this is an awesome tool that I always like to use, and it's gonna help you out with lighting big time. So like, there's no perfect way to light something, and you can like sit there. You could sit there for literally hours and just play with lighting and get better at it, and then keep deleting it and get better at it, keep deleting. And that's really how you are gonna master your lighting. So with Dre, I have his brightness and contrast. Okay, so these are the layers I added to him. I added brightness and contrast, curves, and color balance. Okay, so let's go over color balance first. I just made them a little bit more orange just to match the orange vibe of the scene. So I just put a little bit more on him from the color balance wheel. I dropped down the curves, and with curves I just dropped down the shadows like I was talking about earlier, and the highlights a little bit, just to make him not as bright off the bat. And then I always use like brightness and contrast, and this is like one layer that I really just love using after I use curves. It's really good for doing for just bringing things down another level drastically. Okay, so before we do the lighting back to him, let's just figure out the shadows. So for the shadows, you see how his jersey still has a lot of bright spots on the white? It's white, and every color can be absorbed by it, so bringing it down in shadow can be a lot harder. But once you learn this, it's gonna help you when you're using subjects and they have white. But I'm gonna show you guys a quick way to do it. So first thing you're gonna do is just make a mask of Andre Jackson on the jersey parts. So let's just go ahead and make this mask. All right, so once I have like the selection, an easy way to make this tighter to the subject is you can just right click on the mask that you have of him and intersect the selection to mask, okay? And then from there, I'm gonna make a group, and I'm gonna hit the layer mask icon. So now I have his jersey selected and the socks, which will come in handy. And then what you can do from there is you can actually just bring them down by themselves. And the reason you bring them down by themselves is because you know that always white is just gonna be darker, and that's kind of just how it is. And you guys see how it looks already more realistic. I'm noticing on him too that I could probably add a hue and saturation and bring in saturation down a little bit. Not too much, but a little bit. Okay, so, and if you're asking me, this looks pretty realistic right now. I might even do the same thing. So I'm just gonna paint on white, and I'm gonna add to his shoes. Let's make a shadow underneath him. So I'm just gonna go to the semicircle, solid color, and I'm gonna make it black. Now after I make it black, I'm gonna invert the mask, and I'm gonna actually choose this as multiply. What multiply does is it always makes things darker than what it is currently. So if you had black, obviously it's not gonna make it black, but whatever color you paint on, like say if I'm painting on this and it's like orange, no matter what, even if this color is orange, see, even if this color is orange, it's still gonna, you paint white, it's still gonna make it darker, okay? So that's the beauty of that tool. And underneath, we're going to just use black though. You can get away with it. And we're just gonna paint underneath his feet. Right, so now I'll do a second one. On Andre Jackson, we're gonna add actually a black layer to him now and invert it, and this is gonna be for him on the bottom, like so. And then I'm just gonna uncover the things that aren't gonna be, that are still gonna have a little bit of light. So everything on the outside is still gonna have some light on it. And see how we covered up those artifacts? That was what I was talking about. It should be on multiply as well. But yeah, see how we covered up some of those artifacts, and then we can try and use blending options, see how that looks. It looks pretty good. I also used atmospheric perspective just to get this starting to blend out when it goes into the background, okay? All right, so now for this background that we had, the original background, this is the group right here. We're gonna use tilt shift, and this is gonna make him more in focus. So I'm gonna use filter, blur gallery, tilt shift. The only thing is that we have this in a group. So actually, I'm pretty good on the group. So let's just convert to a smart object and then do it. The only thing with groups is that when you have it inside of a group, the tilt shift won't work as well because it's going directly to the border of the group, and it's not really gonna go outside of it. So see how now you're getting more of that blend in? So that's really cool, and I like that. So we're gonna have to go with that. And the focus area between these solid lines is right about here. You can see his feet are in it. And some people get confused at first because they think that, oh, is this blending going to cut this area off? But you have to think about in perspective that one, you are only on the background layer. Two, his feet are in this area, and it's always going to be retreating back, so you don't need to have the tilt shift area in here because you're not going to get any type of blur, no focus, okay? So don't get confused by that, and just kind of select the feet area, okay? So then you press OK, and now look, It's all coming together now, baby. So I'm gonna put it at 6, okay? And then for this background now, usually, sometimes I use tilt shift, but sometimes I'll just use blur right away. But for tilt shift, obviously nothing's gonna be in focus here, so I just literally bring this all the way down and yeah, kind of choose something around here. So I think that would work. And now, see how he's really in focus? Cool. So now with the rock in front as well, we can add some blur to this. I'm gonna add a solid color, okay? And we're just gonna hide this. We're gonna click here and we're gonna choose a color from this light source. Not the white, obviously, but something a little bit darker because we're gonna put this on linear dodge. You don't need a linear dodge layer to be too bright. And then we're gonna invert this, okay? So what I'm gonna be doing with this is I'm gonna be adding a little bit of glow on the background and really just onto Andre. And you'll see this a lot of times in photography. So I'm just adding a little bit of glow to make him look more realistic. And then we're gonna use blending options for this as well. So just adding a little bit of blending options, adding a little bit of glow, just start varying this up a little bit. You can drop your flow down. Always make a layer mask. See how I make a layer mask and I can switch I can switch with X between my shadows and highlights so easily. So it's kind of a no-brainer to just make a layer mask for almost everything. Okay, so that's really the lighting without doing the lighting, because we didn't really do the lighting yet, but you guys see how blending options can really just show you the way you might want to do your lighting once you really start going on the actual subject, because we still haven't done that and it looks really, yeah, I mean, yeah, it looks realistic. So, and you can always check back and forth between your layer mask there. So there's so many things you can use to your advantage in Photoshop. That's why I just love this program. So now on Andre, we're going to go back on the brightness and contrast, and I'm going to start going in with my lighting and making him look more interesting, more realistic. And I usually stay in my gradient map so I can see all the values and I'm not really focused on color. It really helps me. So I'm going to show you guys how I do my lighting on the subject. Let's go. All right, that took extremely long, but that's all part of the process. If you guys want to get your lighting really good and really looking realistic, I advise you take the time to do it right. And you got to do this over and over and over again through days, months, even years. I've been doing this 3 years and there's always something that I have to learn in terms of lighting, and that's just how you learn, is just doing a bunch of repetitions. And even seeing this now, there's like a bunch of things that I could still go back on and fix, but it's all, yeah guys, so it's all part of the process. And I'm gonna show you guys what I did and why. This is where the mask started, right? We had our color balance, we had our curves, we had our brightness and contrast, exposure, second exposure, hue and saturation, and our color fill to get to where we are. All right, so the importance of the exposure layer, or really the curves, was that I was able to bring him down. So if I disable this layer mask, I was able to bring him down to an even level on what I felt like the light would be without any shadowing, okay? So that was the exposure layer. And then the brightness and contrast, this is like just bringing him down completely. So if there was like no light on him really from the back side and he was just like standing there without like a very bright light source, that would probably be what he looks like. But since we have a light source, I got creative with it and I used my brushes to just go in and just make it more interesting. So I'm always just thinking like, so see how like his face has like light on it? It technically wouldn't because of the sunlight, but since this is an art piece and I know people are gonna be looking at it and they wanna see who it is, I uncover his face. And I always think about that type of stuff. So like bigger things, like some of the shoes, like some people wanna see a little bit of the shoes, so I show a little bit of the drip, just so people will be able to see that. This exposure layer was like, this is what I call like the rim lighting exposure layer, because this exposure layer can really bump up some of the lights that you have on him and bring out some of those really nice highlights that you want to have. And then this is what I call like the extreme shadow layer, and you guys see how like how I have extreme shadows under his neck, under his nose. Those are points where they have a lot of shadows under the legs right here, right now. And then the hue and saturation layer, I actually just decided that he should be a little less saturated because see how orange he is? So I dropped down the hue and saturation a little bit. And then this is the last one. Then this is just the layer that we had before with the black shadow. Make the shadows on the bottom more prominent, just really dark and edgy. Not even edgy, but it's really dark, okay? Then to complement that, I added a linear dodge, and you guys see the effect of this linear dodge. It's really good. And I added the linear dodge first, and like I showed you guys, I usually add the linear dodge first, and this actually gives me like more of a guide to see where I should put my light, because I use the blending options. If I didn't use blending options, see, it would just be like that, which is still good, but also important to add a little bit of linear dodge on the shadow areas, and this actually bumps up the shadows and makes the scene look even more impressive, more realistic. So put a little bit of linear dodge that you have from your layer on the shadow areas as well. This is my color lookups. I didn't even tell you I had the CCs, but this is my CCs group. So this is just a bunch of color lookups that I put together. You guys can download my color lookups. I'll link them in the description. And then add a little bit of curves, brightness and contrast, selective color. I just played around on the yellows since there's a lot of yellow here, adjusted those, and then some color lookups. So that really brought everything together. And then at this point, you could say like, yeah, I mean, this is a final lighting study. Like, there's no crazy elements in here, but this is just like the step one. And this is gonna be a long tutorial, I know, but I really want you guys to watch this through and practice this as much as you need, man. Practice, practice, practice your lighting, and it's gonna get really good really fast if you just dedicate some time every day to practice your lighting. And you can come out with something like this. Not saying this is perfect, but it's definitely a lot advanced from where I was about a year ago with lighting. And then one other thing I did add was the inner shadow on Andre Jackson. So you can just go to your effects and you can add inner shadow there. And then with the inner shadow, I just adjusted the angle so that it would be hitting from the light source, and I made it completely white. And just at a distance of 2, you can actually make this into a layer. If you right click this and create the layer, you bring this to the top, and then you can adjust with a layer mask to get the light out in areas it shouldn't be, or you don't think it should. But always have a little bit of creative freedom, and not everything has to be 100% accurate to what it would really look like. As long as once you start understanding more about lighting, it's the beauty of it, because then you can start playing with it and use it to your liking. So that's gonna wrap it up for the video. Thank you guys for tuning in to another tutorial. This has been CALSOSCOPED, the Artists to Athletes. If it did help, make sure you guys drop a like down below. Consider subscribing to the Patreon, where you'll definitely get this project file and many more that I'll be using, and really everything that I'm working on can be seen over there. And it's a great way to support me monthly. As always, stay scoped, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.
Feel free to subscribe and support the creator on Patreon.